but we don't want to trap ourselves in a situation to where we made the wrong decision. And what I mean by that is equity in your house goes down and you lose your job. That happened to me in 2008. I lost my job, I lost my house, I had a foreclosure, I had a bankruptcy, I had a repo. It ruined my life. That bankruptcy followed me around for 10 years.
Is there really a massive supply problem in the housing market? Well, I've got a great guest with me today, Travis from Real Estate Mindset. His channel is absolutely fantastic. I was just watching one of his videos. He's on the road right now and he's joining us for this live stream today. So thank you so much, Travis, for coming on. How are you doing?
I'm doing a lot better now that I'm talking to you, my dear friend. And for you, Luke, I would happily do collaborations, man. You've been a big part of my growth on YouTube. I value your perspective. I like how you're preaching caution. You're preaching basically be careful who you're listening to. So anyways, man, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, man.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and I love your channel. I love what you're doing, educating people here on YouTube. It's absolutely fantastic, man. So first thing I want to dig into with you, and I know you've heard this, and Travis is down in the US. He lives in Texas, for all of you that don't know. And Travis, basically, you've been hearing the same thing as me, right? Supply, supply, supply. That's the narrative on the street.
Yeah, that is the narrative on the street. And I think supply is important. We have here in America, we have a tale of two tales. We have an abundance of supply with new construction sitting at 7.8 months. So that's a buyer's market. When it comes to existing though, Luke, depending on the metro area, there is limited amount of inventory. Like for example, San Diego. So San Diego is suffering from the limited inventory and the lack of new building. But I think what's important to understand about the narrative that we hear out there, especially from realtors, is understanding why they're saying what they're saying. And that's why you got to be really careful with what information you're listening to, because usually there's a couple things, right? Either sometimes some people say things because there's a sponsorship, right? Maybe they're saying, these things because someone's paying them to. Or another reason is because a lot of the realtors on YouTube, Luke, are lead generators. So they may have, pretty decent points, right? Like, okay, yeah, all right. So historically, okay, inventory is low, even though it's been going up in the winter months because the demand has been crushed. They always spin that back around to, we got to buy right now. If you don't buy right now, the whole world's going to blow up. You're going to be a horrible person if you don't buy right now. And the fear of missing out that we saw over the last 2.5 years, man, it's just really disgusting. So that's why I've really valued our friendship, because it takes a lot for people to go against their peers and to warn consumers about what's going on. You and I see these creators saying things for profit, right? Whether again, it's a sponsorship or whether it's a lead thing. So I think what we're really focused on, what I'm focused on, is PE ratio, price to earning ratio being 7.4, greater than the great financial crisis. And then I'm also looking at payment to income ratio, 40%. If you purchase right now, 40% of your gross income goes towards paying off your mortgage. It's 52% more expensive on average to own a house. None of them talk about that, Luke. All they're saying is it's low inventory. If you don't buy right now, house value is going to go up $150,000. And this is why I'm on this road trip. I'm trying to caution people like, hey, you guys got to pay attention. If you want to know what's going on in the housing market, things traditionally, if we judge from the past, happen first with new construction. So the fact that we see new construction here in the States plummeting as far as prices and inventory shooting up, to me, that's a sign of what's to come in existing. Now, it's going to take a little longer for it to spread to the existing because so many homeowners right now have the 2 and 3% interest rate, but that doesn't mean that things aren't going to change. That's not a permit. We're not in a vacuum. People have to move. They have to refinance. There's death, divorce, relocation. So the narrative with the inventory, I understand it. I think it's important to understand the inventory, but if we really analyze the inventory, Luke, what happens when inventory comes back, okay? So all these bulls want to talk about lack of inventory is propping up prices. The moment that shifts and we have more inventory, then what will be holding up prices? What will be holding up prices? So when we look at what's going on around in the States with the short-term rental bans, and I love how you cover that. You brought Airbnb to me. Thank you so much for that, man. We have those STR bans. That's a significant amount of inventory in specific metro areas. And I'm not really focused, Luke, on the profitability and the vacancy standpoint of short-term rentals. What I'm looking at is the actual bans. Like, you can't do this anymore. Yeah. So that's happening where, inventory is going up in the winter months. With consumers, Luke, I think it's really hard for them to understand who to listen to. When you have only a handful of people like us warning people, at least we're providing data. I'm providing links, man. I'm putting myself out there. For my community at Real Estate Mindset, I'm telling people not to buy. But I've made my community a home buying course for free that I pay for. I pay for a course that I made. And the reason I do that, they got to know how real estate works. So again,
Yeah.
people get lost in that fear of missing out. They're getting bullied almost by realtors, getting shamed by people, when what really needs to happen right now is pretty much everyone needs to take a time out. In my opinion, as we're taking a time out, letting the dust settle, we are empowering ourselves. We're more knowledgeable on how subdivision works, how data works. We're improving our purchasing power, our credit, our income, our assets, and just being happy with our lives. I mean, the obsession right now is just off the chains with real estate, brother.
It's funny because you said about like the 2 and the 3% mortgages that people have locked in. And that I kind of see that as a narrative similar to the narrative we see here in Canada, which isn't that, but it's just that, oh, we have so many immigrants, we have population growth that's going up. So that means that there's always going to be this housing shortage because of this. And it's just like, I've been all over the States too, and I've talked to different people, and you just hear different narratives. People don't realize this, but you go to different places in bubbles and people will tell you different reasons why it's going up, but they react the same way. It's like, Travis, right now, the US and Canadian real estate is on similar trends, and we're separate countries, but we're still humans, right? So it's only indicative of what's going to happen in the future.
And that's scary. That's scary because, during the great financial crisis in the US, the world wasn't in an everything bubble. Back to the great financial crisis, we got bailed out. And I'm afraid, I'm so nervous on what they're going to do next with the bailing out, with the money printing. It's absolutely, it's a terrible thing. The money printing is not going to the people that needs it. It's kicking up inflation more. It's putting panic in people's eyes. And it's, quite frankly, in my opinion, it's evil. They promised us after the great financial crisis. Okay, I think it was, I can't remember, was it HAMP? I think it was a HAMP program. I think they passed about $400 billion to bail out the banks during the great financial crisis. And they told us that they would never do that again. And then they just did it again. March 2023 of this year, they bailed out the banks in a matter of hours over the weekend, Luke? So on one hand, I want to believe that Jerome Powell is going to break the Fed put, so the market doesn't just think that the Fed is, risk on, the Fed is just going to save you. But the thing is no matter what happens, Luke, if consumers can't pay their bills, everything falls apart. So the fact that, we're coming out here in the States, we're coming out of, the whole COVID printing, the stimulus where people were just printed money. We had daycare money. We had all kinds of money, low interest rates. That's all going away. That's all gone. Defaults now are above pre-pandemic in all fields of consumer debt except for mortgages that are conventional. FHA is above pre-pandemic, by the way, but conventional is holding steady. Again, as we see, I think really people are going to start waking up and we already see it, but once that string of delinquencies and defaults really hits these, the corporate balance sheets and the corporate profit, and they have to go out of business. And, I think it's really going to be a domino effect. And you know what, look, we just saw, I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, Citizens Bank went out of business, okay, because of car loans, truck loans going into delinquency. So there's no question. We know there's a massive debt problem. Consumers are drowning in debt. We have multiple data points on this now. The trajectory of delinquencies is skyrocketing. Things are becoming more unaffordable. People are losing money. So I don't think that we should be focused on that fear of missing out. I have to purchase right now, because the fact of the matter is whatever's going to happen is going to happen, but we don't want to trap ourselves in a situation to where we made the wrong decision. And what I mean by that is equity in your house goes down and you lose your job. That happened to me in 2008. I lost my job, I lost my house, I had a foreclosure, I had a bankruptcy, I had a repo. It ruined my life for 9 years, ruined my family's life for 9 years.
This video was powered by ExpressVPN, helping you get around the censorship laws in Canada. Go to expressvpn.com/market mania if you're interested in a VPN.
In 2008, I lost my job, I lost my house, I had a foreclosure, I had a bankruptcy, I had a repo. It ruined my life for 9 years, ruined my family's life for 9 years. And I was a professional, brother. I was a realtor loan officer, very successful, one of the most successful young men, and I was in California, and it blindsided me. I only paid attention when the pain was knocking at my door. And so what I hope to provide our viewers, Luke, is that another perspective, whether or not you agree with us 100%, that's fine. You don't have to, but at least consider the cautious perspective. Let's get out of the fear of missing out mindset, and let's start really being smarter, right? And it's
Yeah.
hard, Luke, because I get why some realtors in Miami, San Diego say what they do. Their markets are tight. My market's
Hmm.
in Texas. I have the most new construction in any state. I'm right next to Austin. I live in Houston. I see it melting down. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
understand that's my market. That's my market. That's why, again, I just go back to consumers educating themselves enough to understand that real estate value and prices is generally created within a property's subdivision. So you don't have to look at the whole world and what's going on and be scared or any of
Yeah.
that. You just have to understand your own local market. You create your goals, and preferably, if you can't wait to buy, some people have different reasons to buy, whatever, you should be purchasing extremely wisely, finding property with a wedge, because if values go down, at least you have a wedge. So if the values go down, you're a little bit safe. And cash flow. Cash flow
Hmm.
is why I lost my house in 2008, 2009. That's why I couldn't cash flow on it. So,
Right.
and I couldn't sell it because I lost $300,000 in equity. I know that because I got the deficiency notice and I couldn't claim insolvency for some reason. And I had a
Yeah.
tax lien for $120,000 for a foreclosure, dude. So,
Jeez.
it's not just a foreclosure, right? You that stuff follows you around for a decade. And I'll tell you,
Hmm.
look, when I was in the ditches, when I had lost everything, I'd lost my family, I'd lost myself, my confidence, and I had bad credit now. So I had to go through half a decade of people telling me no. Life was even more harder because my credit was destroyed. So I don't want people, there's a narrative going around that if you just buy, you could just do a loan modification. FHA is coming out with some insane stuff with forbearance plans, 3-year deferral. But I want people to understand, man, like a modification can ruin your life. It ruins your
Hmm.
credit. It ruins your
Yeah.
credit. You're stuck. If you mod, you're stuck. You're trapped. It's just a very complicated time for consumers. It's even complicated for us, Luke. You know that. We don't know, we get a lot right. We don't always get everything right. But when we
Hmm.
learn, again, when we look at PE ratio, we look at payment to income ratio, these are facts. But here's the issue in the States, and here's what really happened as well, the migration. So the migration has been a factor because for example, in Texas and Houston, if someone moves from California, their PE ratio may be 2, right? Where the
Hmm.
normal person at 7.4, way out of reach. And
Yeah.
see, that's the frustrating thing. And I see that happen in Houston because Houston, we have a bunch of inventory and homes are relatively, they're still way overpriced, relatively unaffordable. So I see migration coming in. I'll watch houses on MLS, looking for the price cuts, right? Oh, another price cut. Like, oh, I'm going to make an offer soon, right? I'm trying to make an offer every day. I've made an
Hmm.
offer. I started renting in 2021, and I've made an offer every single year, but I'm only making offers on houses
On
that have
numbers, yeah.
fundamentals. That's the
Yeah.
thing I'm talking about
Yeah.
people. And the thing is, look, and I just want to say this, man, I'll shut up, but I think it is so important for people not to get trapped in echo chambers, not to get trapped in anyone's narrative, in a crash narrative, in a moon narrative. What people need to understand, again, is themselves, right? We're here to help, to guide, share perspective, share data. But ultimately, Luke, this is in the hands of the consumers. We can't make their decisions for them.
No, no, we can't. And yeah, I think that you really hit the nail on the head with what is going on in the market. And what you said there, it kind of resonated with me as well, because I think a lot of my viewers as well have seen like home prices and they've just marched off away. I mean, some places have doubled. When I was traveling throughout the States, it was the same thing there. A lot of these areas in Idaho and Utah, the prices had doubled. And a lot of people, it was because of the migration. And we see similar trends here in Canada as well with migration trends. I say here in Canada, I'm in Mexico, but whatever. But yeah, so the migration trends, we see similar things with certain places like where I'm at actually has huge amounts of migration and there's huge amounts of building though. So people are often comparing it, like they're comparing like a Calgary to a Toronto, just as they're comparing like a San Francisco to an Austin, Texas. And you just cannot do that, in my opinion. You're talking about two entirely separate economies. They might as well be in different countries. And when people try and justify a price just because, oh, it's cheaper. Yeah, but what about the incomes in that area? Is it actually cheap for the people there? Because if it isn't
Yep.
cheap for them, then it's not really cheap, is it? So I think people get really messed up because they come from these overpriced markets and they come by in places like Texas and places like Alberta and they think, wow, this is a lot less. It's still in its own bubble, as you probably know as well. these localized bubbles.
That's a perfect way to put that. Because when you look at the local, or natives, we'll say, right, like the locals in the area, and you look at the median income or even the average income or whatever even if we take the median house, the whole household income, and we compare that to median sales price of houses, and we can understand the payment. I'm a loan officer as well, so it's easy for me to calculate payment. Brother, ain't no one can afford no houses right now. And see, like, yeah, we got to understand Austin's different than San Diego. But that's not saying we don't have a massive bubble right now. And that's not saying that things are not going to crash. Basically, what I'm saying, a couple things holding up the market. First of all, what I found out is there is still forbearance programs that are going to end in 2 days, the end of November. So I was like, what? So let me tell you, if you had a COVID forbearance, okay, remember COVID, like, that was like long time ago, like years and years ago, right? You still are protected from foreclosure. Right now, there are 375,000 households in America that are not paying their mortgage, that are protected from the banks foreclosing on them. That ends this month. So that was propping things up. The bank bailout's propping things up. The narrative and the sentiment is propping things up. But people are starting to wake up, Luke. And again, two things: defaults and unemployment. Those are the missing pieces of the puzzle, in my opinion. And as long as we stay here elevated and the Fed doesn't flip the economy, housing market, probably stock market, maybe stock market, I don't know a lot about stock market, it's going to crash. They don't have to do anything. You're not supposed to suck out money out of the economy, which is what they're doing. So we know, you and I know, the market will crash depending on what the Fed does. And then in the Fed's mind, they're probably like, well, what will the market let me get away with? Which brings us to the Fed put. And I really hope, and Danielle DiMartino Booth, she's an analyst, man. And, she brought something to my attention where it kind of gave me a little bit of hope with Jerome Powell, because when they did the bailout, man, this year, that was a tragedy for the world. For the world, it was for all the people on the bottom, us, middle class, lower class, that was an absolute tragedy. So, but what she said is he had to do that. If he didn't do that, he had to stop quantitative tightening. He couldn't make policy changes. So what Danielle is saying is he's going to break the Fed put. If that man breaks the Fed put, he's an American hero.
You know what, Travis? I think that already happened actually in 2020, and I'll tell you why. Because basically when the stock market was absolutely cratering, I remember the Fed cut rates and it just absolutely ripped lower after that. Like it went down I think 5 to 7% in one day. Like it was a record, and then it continued going down. And it was only until you got the CARES Act, until you got the stimulus, until the government came in with the fiscal. So I now think it's more like a government put, essentially, which is even worse in my opinion, because now the government, what they're doing, whereas the Fed and the central banks, they would bail out the banks, what they're going to do is they're going to bail out the consumer instead. Now, obviously, we know that has massive consequences when it comes to inflation. And I hope that's not the case. I really hope that's not the case, because if that is the case, we're just going to see ever higher interest rates from now on. And even though interest rates will come down at some point, there's no question of a doubt about that, they're going to go even higher after. And when they're coming down, they're not going to be coming down to zero probably. So I think that's the real risk with what the government does. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, it is. It's what's so amazing about all this, Luke, is this whole thing, the entire situation is government induced. They're both the run up and the crashing or the tightening. So, you and I can pay attention to fundamentals all we want, but and we have a group on Facebook and we talk all the time, but we talk constantly about we need to stay sharp. We need to continue to be intelligent. And if we have to adjust our perspective, we have to do that, because we're not in control. We're just letting people know, hey, the fundamentals are nowhere to be found. And buying right now, you're jumping into an abyss of who knows what's at the bottom of that. Who knows, how deep that goes. You're jumping into the abyss. And one thing that we know, Luke, about people purchasing real estate, unfortunately, it is a very emotional decision, and realtors and professionals know that. So they know all they got to do is convince one person to make $10,000. So that's why you see it on YouTube. The lead generation on YouTube, man, I'm telling you, man, they get one person that calls them, they make 10 grand. They make two people that calls them, that's 20 grand. So they don't give a crap, about the consumer, because in their minds, realtors are saying, well, it's your decision to buy. I'm just sharing my perspective. It's just going to go up in value. I did my service to society, and that's wrong, and
Yeah.
it really pisses me off, Luke. And you know, and that's why, and, you know, when they got, I think this was last month. I think the verdict came down with conspiracy for realtor commissions in Missouri led to a five. I'm sorry, I think it was $5.4 billion fine. That's just in Missouri. That's just in Missouri.
Wow.
So if you have realtors listening, I'm not trying to bash realtors. I'm trying to make people, including realtors, aware that even though commission is negotiable, the market is set up to burn
Hmm.
stupid, I'm sorry, I don't want to say stupid, burn consumers that are not paying attention.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is. And that's what I'm saying, man. You know, I hope your community, my community, we continue to get sharp. We continue to stay ahead of things. I don't want to get wrapped up in anyone's narrative, my narrative, your narrative. I don't want to be stuck in an echo chamber. All I'm trying to do, man, is continue to evolve my perspective, continue to evolve the caution, because at the end of the day, Luke, dude, I want to buy a house, man. I'm renting right now. I converted my primary to a rental because I had to leave. It was a neighbor situation. I didn't even want to be profitable, but I was like, all right, because I don't believe in selling real estate. First of all, I think we should keep houses because traditionally houses are a great investment. I've
Hmm.
been in real estate for 22 years. I love it. I've owned several houses. Luke, I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to move on with my life. You know?
Yeah,
Jeez.
yeah, I know. I can tell you, like here in Canada as well, Travis. I mean, some of the declines that we've already seen, because this bubble, it was way bigger than the bubble in '08. I mean, you can probably tell me this, but
Yes.
we were looking at price to income ratios. You know, 16 times income is cheap in Canada. Like that's
What?
how crazy. Yeah, that's how crazy things got. I mean, people moved to the city that I'm from and literally home prices are like 12 times income, I think. And people
Okay.
say, "Oh, that's cheap." And in other places it's even worse like that. What do you think of that?
Well, let me ask you this because the first thing that comes to mind, the reason why the P ratio is because for in the states it's 7.4 annually, seven annualized looking 7.4. The GFC, Great Financial Crisis, it was I think 6.8 or 6.9. So we have a bigger
Wow.
bubble than the GFC
Wow.
and the unaffordability of the 80s, and nothing's going to happen. We're going to live softly land, whatever. So when you say that in Canada, I think it's because you guys have those trash loans. Do y'all still
Mhm.
have negam? Do y'all still have the negam loans, or is
Yeah,
it it's
yeah,
just
we still have loads of those, and I'm actually kind
so?
of thinking like, what's going to happen? And I wanted to talk to you about this actually because I was talking to Scott Walters about this the other day, but you'll probably have a better insight on this because you were actually working the loans back during the GFC. So effectively in Canada, they had these dodgy mortgages which are called fixed payment variable rate mortgages. So basically, it's a variable rate mortgage, but the payment is fixed. So what
Okay.
happens is if interest rates go up, the amount of principal you pay goes down, it's more interest, and then eventually you get to a point where you hit a trigger rate, and
Yep.
then the bank either has an option to negatively amortize it, even though when you renew your mortgage, because most people have like a 5-year mortgage here in Canada, so when you renew your mortgage, you're then stuck with a lump sum payment because you were negatively amortizing the loan, so you have to make a massive lump sum payment because you'll be upside down on it, or they have the option to actually increase people's payments. So some people have seen their payments double and triple, and other banks, about three, because there's about 5 big banks here in Canada, and they're most of the mortgages. And 3 of those big banks, they are allowing the negam loans. So like people's amortizations have gone like to 90 years in some cases. But the thing is, they look at that on their application and they go, okay, my loan's gone to 90 years. But in 5 years' time, they have to renew that and bring it back to 25 or 30. And if their loan to value ratio has gone beyond 80%, they owe the bank money. Like they are completely screwed. So what happened in the GFC? Because there was even like a bailout, wasn't there? There was a loan modification, the Obama loan modification.
Yeah, but that was trash. So
Okay.
yeah. Okay, so what happened, Luke, is people stopped making payments on their mortgages. You know, so I don't care what the P/E ratio is. If society can't pay their mortgage and we have unemployment, it is all going to fall apart. And what happens here is going to happen there because of how intertwined the world is now. So I think it's gonna be super bad. But what happened in the GFC again, man? You know, foreclosure crisis. You know, a taxi driver had 6 houses. That's fine, right? You can have 6 houses, but if you don't make your payment, everything falls apart for everyone, including the bank. So you know, we had this foreclosure. They brought in loan modification, but for the first few years of loan modification, Luke, no one knew what the hell to do. And I know that because I got out. of, 'cause I lost my business, and then my first job back into the workforce was loan modification. So I was on the ground floor of the front end origination, not the processing. So I had a processor work for me, but I would originate loan modifications. And honestly, brother, I could only do that for a few months because we were required. Okay, so someone called me like, "Hey, Travis, I'm suffering right now. I can barely pay my mortgage. I want a loan modification." Dude, we had to tell them to stop paying their mortgage. And we didn't know if the mod was going to work. So we had to tell them,
Jeez.
all right, you're all in now. Destroy your credit, stop paying your mortgage so we can possibly see if you qualify. And oh, by the way, you owe us $5,000. So I was like, man, I can't do this. I can't do this. So then I got into debt settlement. And
Right.
that was another BS thing, man, where you stop paying your credit cards, you go in to settle them for like 50 cents on the dollar, but I mean it destroys your credit. It's just, so what I did, man, I went bankrupt. I did Chapter 7. People are like, "Oh, you got bailed out. You just walked away from your debt." Well, no, I didn't. Even though I went bankrupt on that debt, that bankruptcy followed me around for 10 years. The statute of limitations was also extended on my lien because of the bankruptcy. So the lien followed me around past the normal statute of limitations the IRS has to collect. I mean, do you really want to go through life being chained to the gutter? I was. To get up out of the gutter when you're chained to it is no easy task, and that's not how life should be. And so when I hear you say these things about people in Canada doing these high risk loans, just ask myself, like, is owning a house, is the obsession of owning a house, is it really worth that type of risk? These are primary residences. These are where families are made, children are raised. And which brings me to the biggest problem of all, Luke. I think because I hear, oh, here's going to be the solution, here's a solution, and I haven't heard no one, especially in the politics, talk about the real solution, which is stopping the corporate purchasing, institutional landlords capitalizing the housing market. And that goes as well a little bit for the mom and pops. Like, it's got out of hand. There's some people, Luke, individuals that own 200 houses. You don't need 200. Put a cap on it. Put a tax on it. Stop taking our houses away from us. Some people don't want to make $250,000 a year. Some people want to make $60,000 and enjoy their kids growing up. So you can't treat us like we're corporate greedy investors. And that is what the market has done to us. They say, if you want to get into real estate, you got to be top 10%. And that's not the America. That's not the housing market that I remember, man. And it's really mind-blowing how this has just really spiraled over the last 3 years. Very shocking.
Yeah, and a lot of people are just really concerned about it and really worried that they're never going to be able to afford a home. And I think this is one of the biggest problems. And you do a great job on your channel as well talking about this. A lot of people are fearing ever owning a home. So that obviously creates a lot of FOMO in their mind if they think there's some sort of opportunity for them to buy, or they think the market's going to run away from them. And I think a lot of the narratives that we see around mainstream media, the government, and all these realtors on YouTube and influencers pushing it kind of generates this almost like melting pot of just toxic culture almost for housing, because it's not good when you have everybody rushing in based on their emotions. They're more likely to make a shitty decision.
I mean, they talk about it at these, at realtor groups, lead generation groups. I mean, there's no question about the emotional decision making, and a little bit, I would say, before COVID, when everything wasn't all out of whack, it was okay. It was okay to a little bit. I'm gonna pay a little bit more to live next to the school for my children. That's okay. Or I really like this kitchen, so I'll pay a little bit more. That's fine. But right now, doing that, I mean, if we really want to blow the socks off of people, all we got to do is talk about amortization schedules and how people are literally in a death contract. A mortgage is a death contract, and an amortization schedule is like a free money line of profitability for servicers and lenders. The amount of money that they're making, especially in the first 5 years, Luke, it's outrageous. And on my channel, I try to make a point. I want to get my viewers at least to the amortization schedule, right? Just get there. Just understand how it works, and then decide how you want to pay the amortization schedule down. So a lot of times what I do is I show my viewers, like, okay, after you close, then an amortization schedule is created because you have a loan now, right? You can't do this before you close because you don't have the loan. So you close, you have the loan. I try to explain to people, when we take the average price in America, about the average loan amount, because it's based on loan, $328,000. When I plug in like a 7.5 interest rate into there, if you pay in the first year, if you pay $16,000 towards your principal, straight towards your principal, you save 5 years on your mortgage and over $120,000 in interest. Now think about this, okay? All of the people that purchased, and because in America this is a saying, marry the house and date the rate. If you refinance, you start that whole vicious amortization schedule cycle again. The cost of refinancing is significantly more than most people realize. Now, I understand like the investment side of it, right? Like the flips and like, fix something up, refi, get that cash, buy another house. I understand that. I'm talking about consumers. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, because it's all front loaded, right? All the interest is front loaded. So if
Yeah.
you're refinancing it, essentially you're starting from scratch. You're not even, you might not even be paying down the house, especially at today's interest rates, or you're paying like a fractional amount of the
Yeah.
house down. Like I'm not sure what it is now. It's probably like 10% of the loan goes towards the principal, even that.
No,
Wow.
well, actually, it depends on the interest rate and the length of the loan, and it's harder for me to pull up amortization schedule at the hotel. But basically, Luke, like put this in perspective, like your month one payment, almost all the money is going to go towards interest. But your very last payment, your 360th payment, which is 30 years, right? Your 360th payment is going to be total principal. Because remember,
Yeah.
you paid the interest before the principal. And honestly, Luke, I don't know how that's even legal. In my opinion, second worst consumer debt legal, right? I'm not talking about mob debt. Second
Yeah.
worst consumer debt is a 30-year or more mortgage because of the front-loaded amortization. Now, credit cards are even worse. So I won't say it's worse than credit cards, but these amortization schedules, man, are bad, very, very bad. They're costing people way more money than it has to. And that's why it goes back to me saying we all have to get smarter. You, me, everyone, because most people don't even know how an amortization schedule works. They assume it's like a car, equal payment, right? Like, okay, this much goes to principal, this much goes towards interest every single payment. It's an installment, but that's not how mortgages work.
That's really interesting and an excellent point. Well, listen, man, thank you so much for coming on the channel. It's been an honor. We got to do this more. I know I need to do more collaborations because it's been so long since I've had people on the channel, and I do love doing this. I think people get a lot of insights from people like you, and they see your perspective and they can see what you're doing on your channel, which I think is awesome. So is there anything that you want to say before we wrap things up here, Travis?
I would just say to anyone that's discouraged on the sideline, just hang in there, refocus your energy, your time into people you love, lift the people. Everyone's going through a hard time. And as far as financially, man, there's two things that I would really try to focus on: saving as much money as possible, because I believe we're in the front end of a recession. And if we want to get through the recession, okay, we can't be spending money on stuff right now. Like right now is when we need to be saving because of what's coming. So I would just really encourage people to try to change their spending habits, save money, make money if you can, get another job, self-employment. Just continue to empower yourself. Don't assume that you have the answers. None of us have all of the answers. I would just say that, I just hope people understand that how important they are, how important their decisions are, and how much they're loved by someone. I don't know, but we're just in a really bad society, Luke. And the more love, and this may sound sappy, and I'm sorry, but the more love that we can spread, I think that's going to be, I think it's going to be very helpful because we've lost a lot of that. The last thing is I just really appreciate you, man. I really appreciate you not doing that narrative. I know you crushed on YouTube. You could get lead generation. You could flip your narrative and get filthy rich. And I just wanted to say, I appreciate you staying in the pocket with me down here on the bottom and just trying the best you can to warn people and to offer your cautious perspective. And I thank you for that, sir.
Great advice. And I appreciate you too, man, and what you're doing. Thank you so much for coming on the channel. Everybody, check out Travis's channel. He does a great job over at Real Estate Mindset. I will link him in the description. If you're looking for a VPN to get around the censorship laws, go to expressvpn.com/market mania. If you've enjoyed this video, you might like this video here. You might like this playlist here. I will see you in the next one.